Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG. For today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 5 modern decks that are coming out of Modern Horizons feeling like the biggest losers. We already talked about 10 decks that felt like winners coming out of Modern Horizons. Those were in the past 2 videos. Links will be down in the description to check out both of those once you're done with this video, as well as the link to my sponsor, CardSphere. Thank you so much to CardSphere for sponsoring this video, as well as all the other content here on the channel. But with that being said, go ahead and check out all of those links down below in the description as soon as we find out what are the 5 decks that are feeling like the biggest losers from Modern Horizons. The first 2 decks that are feeling like the biggest losers from Modern Horizons really didn't get hurt too much, but it's the fact that they were expecting to receive quite a bit of help and then just didn't get it from the set. So we're going to come down here to a card that looks very innocuous, which is called Venomous Changeling. 3 mana 1/3 Changeling Death Touch. What's important about Venomous Changeling is that when Venomous Changeling was announced, it was also announced that there was going to be tribal help, tribal cards as a sub-theme in the set. We saw decks like ninjas, goblins, zombies, as well as slivers that were all getting a bunch of help from this set. Things like you can even see here, we have a goblin here, we've got a ninja here, we've got a sliver here, and one of the big cards that got announced on the same day that Venomous Changeling got announced was the Goblin Matron, which meant that people were very excited. They were printing a card of legacy power level in Modern to help out a specific tribal deck. So again, a lot of people started speculating then, what other cards could we potentially see from legacy tribal decks that could end up showing up in these modern archetypes. And some of the decks that started speculating a little bit that they might be getting some help were Merfolk as well as Elves, both of which are solid modern decks, but arguably are both worse than humans right now, humans just being the best tribal deck in the format. However, notably, I do want to give a quick shout out to Michael over here. We're actually using his list here from the SCG Modern IQ in Williamsport. Michael is actually a supporter of the channel. He was in my comment section of, I believe, the last video that I put out, maybe the video before that, talking about how he hasn't seen me at, or how I didn't go to the event that he top-8'd with Elves. So again, congratulations, Michael, on a great finish. And so I was more than happy to use your list here for the video. So congrats, Michael. But Elves was a deck that a lot of people were expecting to see some help. Cards like Wirewood Symbiote, Quirion Ranger, Timberwatch Elf, all of these cards that show up in the Legacy Elves deck, people were already playtesting. If you go over to the Star City Games channel, there were some decks where they were putting in some cards that they expected to see in Modern Horizons, and one of them was an Elves deck, I believe played by Ross Miriam, where he expected to see Wirewood Symbiote and some of these other new, or not new, but reprinted Elves cards that could really help out these modern Elf archetypes. And unfortunately, Elves got absolutely nothing. Same is true for Merfolk. I followed Nikachu on Twitter as well as watch a bunch of his videos. He is a very outspoken member of the MTG community because of his love and passion for the deck Merfolk in Modern, and he was also expecting to get a little bit of help when they announced that there was going to be tribal help from this set, and Merfolk again got essentially nothing. What makes it even worse is, even though these decks weren't hurt a lot, there were still a few cards in the set that do kind of hurt them. So if we go up to the black cards, there was a card called Plague Engineer. Death Touch, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type your opponents control get -1/-1. So it is a negative card that punishes you a little bit if you are a tribal deck. So that's very good against Elves. Elves has many creatures that are with 1 toughness unless you have out a lord like Azuri to maybe, or not even regenerating helps anything, but Elvish Archdruid as well as the Elvish Clancaller being your Elf Lords here. But the Elves of Deep Shadow, Elvish Mystic, Heritage Druid, Llanowar's Elf, the token from Dwynen's Elite, Elvish Clancaller, if you don't have another Lord out, there's just so many cards in this deck that could be very negatively affected by a Plague Engineer naming Elves. Merfolk's a little bit safer against it. A lot of the Merfolk are 2/2s with the exception of Benthic Biomancer as well as Silvergill Adept, which would be the cards that would die to a Plague Engineer on Merfolk. You could also potentially name Elemental, which would kill off all the Master of Wave tokens as well. But most of the time, if you're playing against Merfolk, you're going to be naming Merfolk with your Plague Engineer. So again, hurt hurt you for being a tribal deck with Plague Engineer, and then we even saw some other cards that are just okay against, you know, these aggressive decks, things like Dead of Winter, where if you are a snow deck, this is a very good card to, you know, a very good payoff, I should say, for being a snow deck, being able to give -X/-X to all non-snow creatures, where X is the number of snow permanents you control. If you're playing a snow deck, then potentially this could be, you know, -5 to all creatures for 3 mana, which is just very, very good. It does require you to build around it a little bit, but again, hurts elves and hurts these merfolk decks very, very badly. So unfortunately for you tribal players that are of the merfolk, elf, and basically anything that wasn't like ninja or goblin, zombie, or sliver, you guys are probably feeling like kind of losers here after Modern Horizons, after expecting to see yourself get some help for your new modern deck, and then just didn't end up getting it. Next deck we're going to take a look at is Tron. Tron is still very good, and notably, if you are a Tron player, seeing Tron on this list, it shouldn't be as nerve-wracking for you as it could have been had there not been an announcement made, I believe 2 days ago, announcing that the London Mulligan is coming as of Core Set 2020's release, and the London Mulligan helps out Tron quite a lot. So the reason that Tron is on this list is because some of the decks that Tron has bad matchups against ended up getting quite a bit of help. So we already talked about some of those decks in the previous videos, just to bring up one as an example. Infect got a brand new card called Scale Up, which is very, very good, and Tron versus Infect is just a horrible matchup for Tron. I would say probably 90% in favor of Infect. Maybe that's even being lenient. It might be closer to 95-5 in favor of Infect over Tron. So Tron had some unfavorable matchups get a little bit better, and Tron also had some hate cards printed against it because Tron does play quite a few artifacts. You can see 18 artifacts here, as well as 2 Walking Ballista, 2 Wormcoil Engine, and also a bunch of artifacts here on the side: Welding Jar, Gravedigger's Cage, Liquid Metal Coating, Crucible, Ensnaring Bridge, Trinisphere, and Mycosynth Lattice as well, because this is a Karn the Great Creator version. And we did see some good artifact hate printed that we talked about a little bit earlier. We saw cards like Shenanigans, which will be helping out Dredge. We can find that one right there. Destroy target artifact with Dredge 1, so that'll be another card that'll be seeing play in a Tier 1 Modern deck that Tron will be negatively affected by, as well as the printing of Force of Vigor, which I think is honestly one of the best cards in the set. If you guys are sleeping on Force of Vigor right now, don't. This card is very legit, very good. Force of Vigor, 2 green for an instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost, and then destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. Again, this card is very good and ends up hurting Tron negatively. Luckily, there wasn't too much in terms of land destruction, but we did talk about how Ponza could get a little bit better as well due to the printing of Pillage. If we find Pillage. So there could be a few more Ponza players around, which would be bad for Tron, because obviously Tron cares about having the 3 specific lands needed, and Pillage being able to destroy an artifact as well as a land, potentially. They can just choose, like, if there's whatchamacallit, a Tron land that they need to destroy, then they can use the Pillage on that. Or if it's later in the game and there's like a big Walking Ballista that they need to destroy, Pillage could take care of that as well. So again, with a little bit of an uptick in Ponza players, that could be detrimental for Tron as well. And so, with that being said, we'll go ahead and take a look at the next deck on the list, which goes kind of similarly with what we just said here about Tron, how there was some good artifact hate printed, and that is Affinity. If you guys did watch the previous videos, you'll know that I put Hardened Scales Affinity on one of the decks, or as a deck that improved due to Modern Horizons, but in Affinity, just the regular version, here I have as one of the decks that's coming out feeling like one of the bigger losers, and that is because this deck got 0 help and got a bunch of hate printed against it. Again, Force of Vigor as well as Shenanigans, these good artifact hate cards, as well as the, where's my Oofy at? Where's my collector, Oofy? Right here. Collector Ufi, 2 mana, 2/2 activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. Again, also good against Tron, much more detrimental against Affinity than it is against Tron, though. So having these great artifact hate cards printed against the Affinity decks is pretty detrimental for Affinity. The reason Hardened Scales wasn't on the list was because Hardened Scales did get a little bit of an upgrade in terms of the Scrapyard Recombiner. But for the Scrapyard Recombiner, it's not quite as good in regular Affinity as it is in the Hardened Scales Affinity version, because you can't really take advantage of these +1/+1 counters as much, and because it deals with finding constructs. When we look at the constructs in regular Affinity, you'll find out that there's not actually that many constructs as there is in the Hardened Scales version. So Memnite is a construct that you could potentially find with it. Can't find Ornithopter, can't find Arcbound Ravager, you could find the Steel Overseer, can't find Vault Scourge, can't find Etch Champion, can't find Master of Ethereum. So you're basically finding a 0 mana 1/1 or Steel Overseer, which Steel Overseer is very good, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite as good as it would be for the Hardened Scales deck, where you can find a Walking Ballista or find a Hangerback Walker or something like that, where those decks can really take advantage of those +1/+1 counters because of the modular ability, and then put them on one of those constructs that you're searching up. So Affinity, unfortunately, coming out feeling like a loser from Modern Horizons. And that'll take us on to the final deck that is feeling like a loser from Modern Horizons, that ended up with 2 big hate cards printed against it, and that is going to be Storm. So Storm, again, it's a fantastic deck right now. It's been a very good budget deck for a while too. $285 for like a tier 1 modern deck is fairly cheap when we look at something like Tron, which is close to 1,000, Affinity, which is close to 1,000. So $285 for Storm has been a fantastic price to start getting into Modern with a fantastic deck. But when we take a look at some of the cards that got printed, we'll start off with the one that'll see less play. So in green, again, we ended up seeing a card with Storm on it, which is right here, Weather the Storm. 2 mana for an instant, you gain 3 life, and then has Storm. Whenever you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. So your opponent goes off with, let's say 20 Storm or whatever, and they think they're just going to kill you with a Grape Shot, and you cast Weather the Storm in response. You get to gain essentially 60 life, even more than 60, because the original copy will be there as well. Which is very detrimental for Storm, because Storm is a combo deck that can only really do so many points of damage due to mana restrictions and needing to have the right amount of cards to actually go off. So if you are a green player, Weather the Storm could be a fine answer to Storm. However, the thing with these green decks is that most of them had the ability to play something like Damping Sphere. So Tron, for example, maybe gets Weather the Storm. I kind of doubt it. Tron already versus Storm isn't like the worst matchup in the world. It's not great, but it's also just like not the worst, that I don't think they really need to spend a sideboard slot on something like a Weather the Storm. But again, those kind of decks like Tron can't play Damping Sphere, but every other green deck in the format can just play Damping Sphere instead of Weather the Storm. Notably, Weather the Storm does get around things like Wipe Away or Repeal, some of these other cards that you'll see in Storm sideboards to get rid of not enough memory. What? Did I just lose internet? Okay, there we go. So you'll see cards like Abrade, Echoing Truth, and Wipe Away here to help remove Damping Sphere due to its printing and a lot of players playing it. Notably, Weather the Storm does get around those, doesn't get around something like a Negate, though, or if, some people will run Spell Pierce, or, for example, actually, no, that doesn't even work either, because you're just countering the one Storm copy. So yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying there. The Weather the Storm is just very, very good in terms of being able to counteract Storm, and plays around the current cards that they're using to get rid of it right now, like Wipe Away, Echoing Truth, and Abrade for Damping Spheres. And then the final card that got printed is the Buy a Box promo for the set in Flusterstorm, which says counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. For only 1 mana, you can stop your opponent from going off with Storm. What makes this kind of relevant is that, again, most of these decks would have the ability to play Damping Sphere in them as well, but the big one is Arclight Phoenix, the Is It Phoenix decks. Before, none of them played Damping Sphere because they also rely on casting several spells in a turn. You want to chain, Manamorphose into Manamorphose into, Faithless Looting into bringing back 2 Phoenixes or whatever, which requires you to cast several instants and sorceries in one turn. But having Flusterstorm instead of Damping Sphere does give the Izzet Phoenix decks now an out to the Storm matchup. And that's kind of detrimental because Izzet Phoenix does make up quite a big part of the meta right now. It's a little bit less than what it was before, which is good, but still having another answer for a deck like Storm when you're not supposed to have an answer to a deck like Storm, it could be pretty relevant if you are a Storm player. So with that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. The decks that we talked about today, oh man, why is it doing this? Let me just refresh all of these real quick. Are all of these good? Refresh. Alright, sorry about that. So the decks that we talked about today were Merfolk and Elves, as well as all the other tribal decks that were expecting to get help and then just didn't get any help. Tron, due to some artifact hate getting printed. Affinity as well, due to some artifact hate getting printed. And then finally Storm, because of cards like Weather the Storm and Flusterstorm, which both basically have names that say stop playing Storm. With that being said, hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If there was a deck that I left out that you think got a little bit worse due to Modern Horizons, be sure to let me know down below in the comments section, as well as check out the previous 2 videos where we talked about decks that are improving from Modern Horizons. Like I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section, so be sure to let me know what you think. Leave a like on the video and subscribe if you guys did enjoy, and I will see you guys here later for another Magic the Gathering video.